Okay, but did you stop and say, hey, it's me?
No, it's so funny because I hadn't seen them in years. Like, they didn't recognize me. They were like, you are glowing. What's your secret? And I said, honey, I'm healing. Welcome back to Honey, I'm Healing, everyone. This is one of your co-hosts, Renee.
Hey, and this is your other co-host, Irina.
Today we're going to be talking about brain health. And I kind of discovered this on accident through a podcast that I listen to kind of semi-regularly. And 9 minutes and 51 seconds in, I sent it to Irina because I was like, if I could cut a clip of, I think, of what Irina embodies, it would be this conversation. And so I'm really excited to get into this. We're talking about brain health and gut health and all of those things through the context of faith even. And yeah, I can't wait to get into this.
I think this is a very, very timely conversation to have because it's something I've already been reading about in my own private time due to like the gut and brain connection. So I'm really excited to get into this, and this topic just excites me.
Were you familiar with Dr. Amen before?
Yeah, I didn't know his name. But I follow him on TikTok and I see his stuff all the time.
Right?
You really got me when you sent me a brain test. Send me a test and I'm there.
I know. I was like, not us taking another personality test. But this one, it's different because it was like, it measures what kind of brain you have. And I did a little bit more research on that because I know that originally you weren't too happy with your results. But
I have a lot to say on that.
I'm going to touch on a question that you had asked me in texting yesterday when you were like, why are you number 6 if there's only 5 parts? Well, the type 6 through 16 are combinations of the 5.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for those of you who are like, what the heck are they talking about? It's a free brain assessment test, and we'll put the link in the description. And it is all kind of centered around Dr. Daniel Amen, who is a very popular TikTok creator. He's a psychiatrist. He talks a lot about ADHD. That's how I found him. But he talks a lot about kind of just brain function and brain health. And this conversation really had me thinking about things a lot differently. He talked about free will. He talked about what is happiness. That's something that I wanted to get into right away. I've heard it said before, or I've heard conversations about this, of whether or not happiness is a state or a trait. And I am really curious of what you think it is.
I would have to lean. That's such a good question. I don't know, but I believe that it can more naturally come out of the state of your health, which can also be because I don't know, Renee. I don't know.
Gotcha. I'm just kidding.
That book I sent you just now, Brain Matter, I literally stopped on chapter 3, which is talking about how like medicated America is for mental illness. And a lot of it was talking about how happiness starts in the belly. And so whatever that is, I believe that, whatever that converts to being, whether a state or a trait.
So one of the books that I really love is Brene Brown's The Atlas of the Heart. And it's basically a dictionary of what certain emotions are, because I can't think of one time when I was growing up where someone sat me down and said, this is actually the definition of anger, and this is how anger and rage are different, because they are different, and this is what happiness is, and this is what joy is. And that's what her work does, based off of sociology, psychology. It's all data backed, and like, it's really, really, really good. So this is her interpretation of happiness. Happiness is stable, longer lasting than joy, and normally the result of effort. It's lower in intensity than joy and more self-focused. With happiness, we feel a sense of being in control. Unlike joy, which is more internal, happiness seems more external and circumstantial. In her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, she actually speaks on the word makarios, which is the word that Jesus used in, I think it was in the Beatitudes, when he said, blessed are those who mourn, and that's kind of what the crux of a lot of their conversation was in this podcast. But she talks about that word according to a theologian and writer, and how it's the freedom of the rich from normal cares and worries, or to describe a person who received some sort of good fortune, such as money or health. She said, in our keyword literature searches, out of approximately 15,000 articles on happiness, we only found 12 articles that described their focus as a state of happiness. That comes down to 0.08% of studies. The vast majority of research that they did examined happiness as a trait instead of a state. So a trait being part of who we are, not a state, which is something we experience. So she's saying that it is a trait and not a state.
You see, I was more inclined to say state at first.
So was I. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So would you consider joy to be more of a state?
I think of joy as a trait. I think of joy as something that we are instead of something we experience.
Mm-hmm. They're kind of similar to me.
But that's where it gets tricky, because it's like people talk about putting on joy and choosing joy. Well, if it's like not inherent, how can you choose something that's like not a part of you? Or, I don't know. That's kind of where it gets tricky. But
yeah,
this really got me thinking about what is my definition of happiness, and kind of looking externally about that. I don't know. It just kind of really got me thinking.
It's going to take me like a minute to think about it and process that, because I think, ironically, I think we experience joy and happiness more when we just be in it. That's why I don't really ever think about it,
Okay, so one of the things that I really wanted to talk about this episode was the way that Dr. Amen, broke down the difference between your brain and your mind. Mm-hmm. And the way that this is how my brain thought of it, because I'm a very visual person, and you're going to laugh when I tell you kind of how I conceptualized this. Your brain is the Tupperware, and your mind is the spaghetti inside the Tupperware.
I can see that. That's like how I imagine it too. It contains your mind.
Yeah. It's kind of in the same light of like people when they talk about their heart being the center of their emotion. Well, that's not actually true, right? It's an organ that's dedicated to this like conceptual understanding of that's where it's rooted. But, desire and the things that people say are part of our mind, desire, impulse control, all of those things that we'll get into later, like that's all functioning through your brain, which is like just the vessel. So it kind of just depends on what kind of Tupperware you have.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really good way to put it. So what did you like that he said, the difference between your brain and your mind?
Our brains contain our mind. When it works right, you work right. When it's troubled for whatever reason, you have trouble in your life, your brain creates all of your decisions. And then that's when he went into the topic of free will and what's our percentage of free will when our brain isn't operating correctly. You know?
Oh,
and
yeah.
this is something that I really resonated with because when I was in a really self-destructive pattern, I wasn't, it was kind of like, you know, I'm accountable for what I did. I'm not absolving myself of that whatsoever, but I was not in the right mindset. And I don't think that I even really fully understood the ramifications of what I was doing. And that was all chemical in my brain.
Yeah, he talked about how if you drink like 8 Michelob Ultras, that's taking away 40% of the functioning of your brain. And think about it too, like when you're under stress, anxiety, grieving, like that takes away the full functioning of your mind.
Yeah. One thing that he said too that I really liked was you're not stuck with the brain that you have. Yeah, I really liked that. And I liked, so the assessment that we took, both that I sent her, that, you know, because we're personality test girlies. I think it's called brainhealthassessment.com. And there are 5 different types of brain types. There's 16 total, but there are 5 core ones. And I'll kind of just briefly touch on what those are. I'm not going to like go through it really, but we'll talk about, you know, what Irina and I scored just for funsies.
I say talk about the first 5.
Okay, sure. So the first one is balanced. The second one is spontaneous. The third one is persistent. The fourth one is sensitive. And the fifth one is cautious. So the first type, balanced, is healthy and normal. This is what you want your brain to be. And he was talking about in this message or in his podcast that this is where the majority of Americans sat before the pandemic, and it drastically declined after that. And that's, again, I think that kind of goes back to his statement of like, you're not stuck with the brain that you have. So the second one is spontaneous. I for sure thought that this one was me. I'm not going to lie.
I thought I would get that.
Really?
Yeah, not at all.
No, mine was, or it's second, spontaneous, which is short attention span, distractibility, highly creative, impulsive. This is where he says,
JK.
yeah, you're not impulsive. This is me to a T. He's like, this is where people with ADD live.
But you have some of those traits, so.
I do. The third one is persistent, which is focused, gets things done. You worry, you hold grudges if things don't go their way. Fourth one is sensitive. They're deeply empathetic. And he brought up this term that I liked. He called them ants. He's like, there are too many ants. Automatic negative thoughts. That's a great way to put it.
That is
because
so
it's
good.
Like they come in a swarm, right? Sometimes it's a line. I don't know. I liked that visual. He said that this group specifically tends to trend more towards depression or things like that. The fifth one is cautious. These people are early. They always see trouble or predict trouble, and they actually tend to get in less trouble because they anticipate it or predict it. They struggle with physical health symptoms and tension. And then the sixth one, which is what I got,
Do tell us.
is impulsive, compulsive type. Spontaneous, persistent types. This part got me because he was talking about how his first wife was a 6. And
yes. Oh, and then he said what he said, and I was like, oh.
yeah, that part's not so much me.
No, I didn't think so.
But I didn't catch this when I listened to it the first time. He was saying that a lot of people who have alcoholic parents grow up to be in this type because children of alcoholics learn not to talk, not to trust, and not to feel.
Did
And
you
yeah.
relate? Did you relate?
Not at all. No, I'm being totally facetious there. I did. I do. I think that this is kind of where, and I didn't really kind of realize my dad is an alcoholic, so I didn't realize a lot of my behavior tendencies and kind of how that correlates to a reaction of my dad's alcoholism, but I didn't really start to adopt a lot of these until middle teenage years to like into early adulthood, because that's when my dad's alcoholism really manifested, the most intensely. So the spontaneous is a mixture of the second and third one. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I liked yours. I was like, oh, you sound fun. I want to be your friend. Oh, wait, you're my friend.
What did you have tension with about yours?
Because, so I took it once and I got 5. I got cautious. But I took it and I tend to always answer in the middle. So if it starts very rarely, so if it goes from like 1 to 5, very rarely, occasionally, frequently, very frequently, most frequently. And I tend to kind of choose in the middle because I have conflict with like rarely and frequently. Like to me, those are so opposite. So I was like, I don't know. Like I didn't feel it was like one way or the other because, and anyways, so I got 5, which was cautious, anxious. And then I was like, whoa, like I'm not a worst case scenario thinker at all. Like I'm like risk, go for it. Like I don't think about worst case scenarios. Like I have Matt in my life for that. Like we talk about big financial purchases. I'm like, it's going to work out. He's like, no, we need to plan for this. And I'm like, no, it'll be fine.
That's the person who just bought a CD.
But like, that's why he can do those things, because he
true.
does plan.
He has margin, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. And when he told me he was getting it, I was like, sure, go for it. Awesome. Perfect. Love it. We'll have so much fun. So I was just like, And then I took it 5 times and I got 1 every time. And and I made him like read both of them. And I, was like, where do you see me? Because he knows me sometimes better than I know myself. And he definitely said 1. But what's so funny about this is like, maybe the fact that I did answer occasionally is in itself reflective of that anxious mindset or like that 5 in me. And, if I was a 1, I wouldn't be having health problems I have now. Like I wouldn't be looking back and thinking about the fact that this has been like the most stressful, anxious year of my life. So I think I'm a good mix of 1 and 5. And whatever number that makes me in the next, 5 to 16 numbers, that's what I should have done.
Well, hang tight, I'll tell you.
Oh, what's a mix of 5 and 1? Because I think I'm it.
Oh, just kidding. It's so 6 through 16 are a combination of types 2 through 5.
Oh,
so you
okay.
can't be a 1 and a 5. But you know what? I say you can. Anything is possible if you just believe.
A 1 and a 5 makes a 6. So we're the same. Anyways,
I love it.
topic there. It's a good little test. And like what I said to you in the text, maybe sometimes like I think that test in a way isn't to validate what we feel we know about ourselves, but more to bring to light what we don't know. So maybe we are supposed to have tension with it a little bit.
Yeah. I think with mine, he talks about how people with my brain type struggle with dopamine production, which is not news to me. But this test through the context of something that happened in my life earlier this week. So I ran out of my medication that I take, and because of like worldwide national shortages of this medication specifically, it's difficult to get sometimes, and so I've had to like supplement that or find other ways to create my own source of dopamine to get through the day, in ways that like my medicine would just naturally help me do. But so one of the things that I noticed I was doing was I was, in between having my medication, I was binge eating again because I was getting dopamine from eating food. And I noticed that I was doing it a lot quicker now. And I wasn't like, it wasn't out of this place of being like, I don't have self-control, or, I'm doing this because of what's going on in my life. I fully knew in that moment that it's because I'm trying to get something that my brain is used to having now.
Wow. If you had impulsively shopped, would that also fill the same void there?
Yes, but it's not as fulfilling to me.
Okay. Yeah, that's so interesting.
But then, so I saw this video about, it was a guy talking about how he had this technique for helping people stop smoking. And all he did was have them recite this line every time that they lit up a cigarette. And it was, "This is the most loving thing I can do for my body right now." And as people said that, when they went to go smoke, they stopped smoking because they realized, like, this isn't the most loving thing I can do for my body right now. And so I started saying that as I was eating throughout the day, like, this is the most loving thing I can do for my mental health right now, or my body right now. And it changed the way that I saw that too. And I think that it kind of curbed that mindset of, I understand why I'm doing this in this moment. I understand that it's not an emotional motivator that's doing it right now. And what are other ways that I could get dopamine that don't involve eating food to the point of it hurting me?
That's so good.
So, progress.
Yes, that's amazing. Matt also got like the dopamine thing on his, and like he's so aware of it too, and which is why I think he can be like an impulsive spender. But like
we're fun to have around, okay?
Yeah, I was like, you better not get bored of me, okay? I better still be hitting you with that dopamine. I'm kidding, but no, but I don't think I have a dopamine problem because I've never found myself. Would you say you find yourself getting satiated on certain things that do give you dopamine, that like you find like you need a bigger, or like you grow a tolerance to it?
For sure. And I think that that's why, so I think that that's why this combination of, so mine is spontaneous and persistent. So the second and the third one. So I have that spontaneous ADHD, like, sporadic lifestyle, but I'm also when I can focus in on something, it's all I do, and I completely lose track of time. And when it talked about holding grudges, I was like, yep, I do
didn't
that.
know you hold grudges.
I've gotten a lot better about it, especially as I've kind of realized what that does to you and how that eats away at you since I've started my whole healing journey, because I realized what unforgiveness can do in your body and how that can manifest. And
it can cause illness to your body.
Yeah.
Like, emotional pain will cause inflammation in your body. And holding grudges does that too.
But see, this is what I love about our friendship. I'm thinking more of it as like what is this doing to my soul? And you're like, what is this doing to my body? And I do believe that they're both linked. there is very much like they are woven together here. But I'm like, for the sake of my soul, that's ultimately why I did it. I was like, this isn't good for my mind, will, or emotions to hold a grudge against somebody or things like that. So that's just kind of dissipated as I've kind of understood what the implications of doing that are. And I think it kind of boils down to just having more empathy towards people too.
One, when he was saying like each brain type, you have to eat right for your brain type.
Yes.
I thought that was so cool. I don't know why I have this question on here. I forgot. Just this was on my brain test memory. But I have the question on here. Do you struggle with high glycemic foods?
Yeah, that was a big one. So in mine, it said to not eat fruit.
Oh, okay.
He's like, this is saying get your carbs from vegetables. And my first reaction was, ew. Because I have a huge sugar thing. And I remember when I did 75 hard. I remember when I did 75 hard last year, I cut out all refined sugar and I only got sugar from fruit. And obviously, I saw a huge difference because fruit actually has nutritional value. It has fiber and antioxidants, and I do believe that food is medicine. So I did see a huge thing in that. But what I noticed is that I was starting to break out in hives. And
from
so
the
that's
fruit?
Yeah, I think that's kind of part of it. But yeah.
Yeah, if you go ahead and do this brain test, guys, he will it tells you. He will tell you that there are certain foods that you shouldn't be eating, and I don't know the science behind it. I haven't read too much into that, but that's something I'm fascinated about. The more I read and listen, the more I know that it goes even deeper than that. It goes to your gut. And your mind and your gut are connected by the vagus nerve. So it was something I really liked that he talked about. I love that we're doing a podcast about a podcast.
I know.
So I have a background in ABA and behavioral therapy, and I loved when he went to the shows with his stepson, right? Was it with his stepson? But I loved when he would go ask the animal trainers, like, why, how did you get that animal to do that? And she was like, I spoke to her when she was being good. Or I praised her when she was doing what I wanted her to do. You notice what you like more than what you don't like. Expand on the positive. And he touched on that a little bit. And that mindset, that little habit will change your brain.
Yeah. Well, it's positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
Isn't it Pavlov who talked about that?
He talked about classical conditioning. Freud, I think, was about. I should know this. This is what I got my master's in.
It's okay.
Essentially, just with everything in our life, I took a massive hit to my health a couple weeks ago, in pain every day. And the more I would research about it, the more I found myself spiraling to one night I don't know if it's related from me being anxious that night, going to bed reading about this, but I don't know if it was an adrenaline drop or my blood sugar drop, but I woke up my heart was 140 beats a minute, pounding. I'm sweating hard. I felt like I was having panic attacks, but I knew that wasn't the case. I didn't know until the next day what was going on. I guess I've never had anything like that happen to me before, but I was like, okay. Yes, I want to heal. Yes, I want my health to be better. But reading about it nonstop in a what can I do better, rather than just actively being in the one thing I learned and then just doing it, and not so much reading about it 1,000 times and finding 1,000 TikTok videos on the perfect detox or whatever. Just do the one and then just do it and then forget about it.
You know what? Maybe that's your source of anxiety. That's the anxiety in that 5 that you were maybe seeing. It's, I need to get this right now But this is a
Yes.
process, and you have to like,
Yeah.
you have to walk it out. Like, realistically, you're not on any kind of timeline, right? You just want, your motivator is that you just want to feel better. But like, you don't have to get this
Yeah.
right, at the end of the month, or,
Yes. And there was that little snippet there in the 5 about fear of failure. So I mean, we know that's connected a little bit to my 3. So yeah, it's like I'm someone who wants to do it right, and I will be so prepared. And I really am prepared for everything. So I think I've just like had a whole identity crisis, call it, if that, just this past year after having a baby. It does that to you. It really does.
well, yeah, like your body changes, your hormones change.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that's been different from having a child like in your early 20s and then having one in your late 20s?
I still kind of had that identity shift after having Haven. I don't think age
Oh.
matters. I think a big reason of it is because I was previously in a relationship where like being a mother was so undervalued. And like I constantly felt like I didn't meet an expectation, or I wasn't doing enough, like being in school full time and taking care of a kid, because I wasn't providing income, I wasn't providing value. And that really that was set in me. And so I really struggled after having with Lockie. Like all of that came back, but I've really been out of it now. Like we healed that, we did.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of that. But now I'm like fully embracing in my purpose now.
Good. How is that? I was just kind of thinking as you were saying that must have been really hard for you as someone who has your own really concrete definition of what success is to you, and being told that that definition that you hold is wrong.
I didn't feel like I was enough. I didn't feel like it sucked. It just took away from me genuinely wanting to be like fully a mom and taking advantage of that time I did have to be a present full-time mom.
Yeah.
But it's weird. I don't remember. I have like so many. It's crazy that like a lot of bad memories are blocked out. Like they're a blur. Good ones aren't.
No. Because they don't hold trauma.
Yeah, that's true. Something about the 5 that he talked about. So if you're typically an anxious person, he talked about overactive amygdala and low GABA. Now I want to read more into that, but we did talk about our amygdala in a previous session with our nervous system regulation, and how a lot of the emotions that we have from trauma can be stuck in the amygdala. And so of course, if it's overactive and I'm stuck in that fight or flight, like you're going to feel anxious.
Yeah.
Even if like you don't recognize that you're having anxiety. I don't think I've ever like recognized that I'm having anxiety or feeling anxious, but it can come out in the form of cleaning my house 15 times a day and not being able to relax until my whole living room or kitchen is clean. But to me that feels like, oh, I have such good hygiene and like have such good house cleaning traits.
Well, I guess it kind of boils down to the root and the reason of why you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But something that he talked about too is having the brain type 1, a balanced brain, doesn't mean that there is an absence of anxiety. The way that he said it was something along the lines of, there is a healthy dose of anxiety that everybody is supposed to have. And he's like, without anxiety, everyone would go rob a bank because they wouldn't perceive any kind of backlash or like consequences of that, or like, what's going to happen to me if I go rob a bank, or if I do that, well, like I'd go to jail, and you know, there is a healthy dose of anxiety, and I had never thought of it that way. I've always only ever seen anxiety as an enemy. You know, I think in terms of, you know, I think one of these, my worry, I'm very particular about things going a certain way, but I don't communicate that. So I end up resentful a lot, and then that turns into a grudge.
And that's like the core root of a grudge, is because you had expectations that were not communicated.
Or realistic.
Yeah.
I remember, this is so sad, but this is just a glimpse into my life as a kid with an overactive imagination. I would work up these scenarios when I was a kid about how my family was being really distant because they were going to surprise me for my birthday, and they were going to take me to Olive Garden, and then we were going to go to a movie, or like I would make up this entire elaborate story in my head about why people are acting distant, or they're actually just going to surprise me. And then it wouldn't come out to happen that way naturally, because who does that, first of all? But I would come up with these like narratives, like fantasies of why, to explain the behavior of other people. And then I would get really sad or disappointed, and it was like digging a hole for myself, and I didn't know that I did that, or like why I did that until much later in life. But I think that's one of the downfalls of being a creative person, is that your brain can work against you, your imagination can work against you. And I think maybe even, you know, I've talked about how I've struggled with rumination. Maybe that's where it gets into. Maybe that's where I get looped into a thought, and it just like I can't zoom out, you know? It's, I don't know. But kind of going back to what you had said about food and like the source of carbs. I notice that when I eat gluten or bread or things like that, of grains that aren't whole grains, I noticed that the brain fog is so much heavier, and I get really tired. So I think that the source of these like vital nutrients that we have is important, and I think that that's why I find this test ultimately super valuable too, because it doesn't just give you your type, it gives you insight on how do I manage this brain type and how do I make it better.
We've got a little Bubba here, guys. Little Lucky,
Little baby Bubba.
Yeah, say hi. Who's really needing mommy's attention.
That's okay.
So,
Yeah,
I have a question. What do you think? So he talks a lot about how it's so important to go and get your brain scan done, and go, you know, to someone who's more functional, a doctor who can be more functional and work with you with your brain. And what do you think the steps should be for people like us? Do you think we need brain scans?
100%. I think when he talked about how psychiatry is the only medical profession where they don't look at the organ, that blew my mind. Yeah, Lucky's like, that's malpractice right there. Yeah, it is. Because I don't think that a lot of people, and this is my own bias, I think that a lot of people that are even being diagnosed with ADHD now, or ADD, you know, how much of that is because of nutrient deficiency, or, you know, I think it's easier to just prescribe a pill. And I'm saying that as someone who has been on and off of ADHD medication, and I undeniably know and understand that I have ADHD, and but there are things like that where I 100% think that we should get our brains scanned. And I think that, you know, he was even talking about like the likelihood of dementia, and how he went to go get a colonoscopy when he was 50, and he asked his doctor, why aren't you going to scan my brain?
We're more likely to get our anxiety and depression medications without getting any brain scans done. And he's so right. I used to work for a psychiatrist for like a solid 6 months until his wife fired me because I didn't want to come in 4 days after giving birth to a baby. Oh my God. I was the medical assistant. So when a recurring patient came to fulfill their subscription, I would have to do like, quick, tell me how you're feeling. Good. I'll write that down. Doctor comes in, I update him. Or if it's a new person, it's an evaluation. Like I remember doing evaluations on people who were diagnosed with schizophrenia. And I'm like writing all these notes that they're telling me. And like he comes in and I tell him the notes and he's like, all right, you have schizophrenia. We're going to give you this. No brain scans done. None of that. Like Adderall was given like candy. Like he spoke to these people for 10 minutes. They were prescribed a medication that then would change their life, their brain, their body, their gut, everything. And funny, I went to go read reviews of his practice last night after I read the podcast, and like the reviews are people like, how does this man speak to me for 10 minutes and have the nerve to prescribe me a medication without even talking to me about my health history? And it's wild how quickly these drugs are given without any consideration to the rest of the body or the root causes of, because all of this really, they're symptoms of an underlying disease.
You know, he talks a lot about the energy consumption and like how much of your energy, I think he said your brain takes up 20 to 25 to 35 or 20 to 30% of your calories. Your brain is one of your most important organs. How are we not actively scanning it? And how are we not making that an important thing?
I saved this really cool fact where he said that he was talking about taking care of your blood vessels and how our brain uses 20% of the oxygen needed.
He said you don't actually lose brain cells, you lose blood vessels. And he was talking about
there
this in
go.
Yeah, he was talking about this in the context of the importance of needing to exercise as a way of increasing your blood flow. And then he correlated that with like people or men who have erectile dysfunction or things like that. It's important to get your blood flowing for so many different reasons. But this brings up a fun factoid that I'm curious if you were told when you were younger that your boogers are dead brain cells.
No one told me that.
Oh my gosh. I full on believed that for up until today. I was today years old when I found out that your boogers are not dead brain cells.
Renee.
Never mind the fact that it's literally just mucus. I fully thought that it was dead brain cells. But then I was thinking about that, like, how did I believe that for so long? Because, like, when you're sick, it's not like your brain is, like, dying. When you have a runny nose, my brain's going. No, that makes no sense. How did I not understand that earlier?
It's okay. I thought buffalo chicken wings came from buffaloes. Sidetracked, but guys, we encourage you to go listen to this podcast.
Yeah, I really like it anyway.
And follow him on TikTok. He's got some great information.
Yeah, I just like how they put it in the context of faith, and that, like, because the Dr. Daniel Amen went into psychiatry to talk about medicine in the context of faith, and I think that that's a huge thing too. And he talked about when he would go to church and see the church was feeding people bacon and donuts, and he's like, you save people and then you send them to heaven early.
Oh, I loved that he said that. I loved it because we need to be more accountable for what we are feeding ourselves and our kids. And this is not a judgment statement. This is like a motivational statement for myself, an inspirational statement for myself, guys. Like, we should be accountable and we should be motivated, but by what we're putting in our bodies. And because you wouldn't, like, you take heavy consideration, you know, someone takes a lot of consideration on getting a tattoo, on which brand of makeup they're applying on their face. Like, we can spend hours watching TikTok videos of like the brands of makeup we choose. Why aren't we doing that with our food?
Yeah, I don't think there's such thing as a bad food. I think it's how often are you eating that? It's like the phrase, too much of a good thing is bad. I don't think that it's a bad thing to eat a donut.
Oh no, remember, I'm a sugar fiend. Like, I do believe like it's okay in moderation, but I think just in general, like having the mindset of like nourishing my body and seeing food as medicine to your body. I think that, like, why are we not instilling that into ourselves and our friends and our families? And why is the government not doing that?
Dude, now she's getting into her conspiracy theories. Anyway, this was a really fun, spontaneous, sporadic, rabbit hole inspired conversation. And
thank you to Dr. Amen and the host that had him for the podcast we listened to. We could also link that. We think everyone should take a listen.
The Leader's Cut with, I think his name is Preston Morris.
Okay.
Yeah.
We learned a lot, and we think you will too if you listen.
Yeah. In lieu of a longer episode today, go listen to that session because it was extremely informative.
Mm-hmm.
And we will see you guys next week.
Sounds good. Bye.